Welcome to the Battleground Chronicles World War II channel. Subscribe to our channel because every day we publish stories about the valor of American soldiers based on real events. Support us. Like our videos if you like what we do for you. October 2, 1944, 11 a.m., Aachen, Western Germany. The sky hangs low with leaden clouds, a persistent drizzle mixing with the mud below. A cold wind cuts through the soaked uniforms of the soldiers of the 30th Infantry Division. In the distance lies the first German city that the Allies will capture, the cradle of the Holy Roman Empire, where 32 German monarchs were crowned. But for these young Americans, Aachen is just another point on the map in their advance toward the heart of the Third Reich. None of them yet know that in the next 19 days, they will participate in one of the bloodiest urban battles of World War II. This morning marks the beginning of the operation to breach the West Wall, the formidable defensive line on Germany's western border. 400 artillery pieces and mortars unleash a barrage of fire, clearing a path for the advancing troops. The air fills with deafening thunder as the earth trembles underfoot. Soldiers of the 117th and 119th Regiments of the 30th Infantry Division prepare to cross the Würm River, a shallow stream with steep banks. Beyond this natural obstacle await dozens of German pillboxes, constructed of reinforced concrete and built into the hilly terrain. Major General Leland Hobbs, commanding the 30th Infantry Division, gives the order to attack. The German machine gunners remain silent until the last moment. They are waiting for the first American soldiers to be exposed in the open fields to maximize their kill zone. Behind the concrete walls of their pillboxes, they ready their MG-42s, weapons capable of firing 1,200 rounds per minute. The calm before the slaughter. 11:15 a.m. Private Harold Kiner of the 117th Infantry Regiment, 30th Infantry Division, moves toward the Würm River. His heart pounds in his chest as artillery shells explode around him. The thunderous bombardment has been going on for days, but the concrete German bunkers remain largely intact. The air smells of cordite and wet earth. His boots sink into the mud with each step. "Move, move, move," shouts a sergeant somewhere behind him. Kiner reaches the river's edge. The Würm is not impressive, barely 20 feet across and shallow enough to wade through, but the steep banks on both sides make it a natural trench. He slides down the muddy embankment, cold water seeping through his boots as he splashes across. The opposite bank is steeper, and he claws his way up, fingers digging into the mud. As the first wave of Americans becomes visible on the opposite bank, German machine guns open fire from camouflaged positions. The distinctive ripping sound of MG-42s, nicknamed Hitler's buzzsaw by American troops, fills the air. Bullets tear through flesh and bone, turning the Würm's waters crimson. Within minutes, the scene becomes a vision from Dante's Inferno. Bodies float in the shallow stream, the water now running red. Men scream for medics, for their mothers, for God. Some make it across only to be cut down as they reach the top of the bank. Others freeze in terror, becoming easy targets. Kiner presses himself against the embankment, heart racing. A bullet kicks up mud inches from his face. Through the chaos, he hears a cry nearby. Two of his squad mates are hit, bleeding out in the open. Taking a deep breath, he dashes toward them, dragging them to relative safety behind a small rise in the terrain. As he turns to check on the second wounded man, he spots a German grenade arcing through the air, landing near them. Without hesitation, Private Kiner throws himself on the grenade, using his body to shield his wounded comrades. The explosion tears through his abdomen, killing him instantly, but saving the lives of the two men beside him. For this act, he will posthumously receive the Medal of Honor, the first of many acts of desperate heroism in the battle that is just beginning. By afternoon, elements of the 30th Division have breached the German defenses, subduing approximately 50 pillboxes. Each concrete fortress requires about 30 minutes of concentrated effort to neutralize. Teams of infantry work with deadly efficiency. Flamethrower operators burn out gun ports, while demolition experts place satchel charges against walls and engineers use pole charges to blast open entrances. Once a hole is made, Grenades are tossed inside before infantry storm in with submachine guns and bayonets. The price is steep. One company loses 87 men in a single hour. Another reports 93 casualties out of 120 soldiers after a German artillery barrage. By evening, the crossing of the Worm River and the establishment of a bridgehead has cost the 30th Infantry Division 300 dead and wounded, and they've barely begun their push into Germany. October 2, 1944, 4:30 p.m., the town of Pallenberg, Germany. The air is thick with dust and smoke from collapsed buildings. Staff Sergeant James Carson of the 119th Infantry Regiment leads what remains of his platoon through the shattered streets. Of the 30 men he started with this morning, only 18 remain combat effective. The others are dead, wounded, or shell-shocked beyond usefulness. The Germans are fighting for every house, every room. This isn't the retreat Carson witnessed in France. These men are defending their homeland, and they fight with desperate ferocity. "Watch the windows!" Carson shouts as they approach a 3-story apartment building. "Phillips, take point!" Private Phillips moves forward cautiously, his M1 Garand at the ready. He reaches the doorway, peers inside, then signals the all clear. As he steps through the doorframe, the staccato burst of an MG-42 erupts from a second-floor window across the street. Phillips' body jerks violently as bullets tear through him, his blood spraying across the building's facade. "Sniper! Second floor!" Carson yells, diving for cover behind a destroyed cart. From his position, Carson can see the German machine gun nest in the apartment building. He signals to his bar gunner, who sets up his weapon and provides covering fire. The distinctive thump of the Browning automatic rifle responds to the German MG-42, suppressing it momentarily. "Flanking team, move up through that alley," Carson orders, pointing to a narrow passage between buildings. "We'll keep them busy." 3 men dash across the street while Carson and the bar gunner maintain fire on the German position. 5 agonizing minutes pass before Carson hears the distinctive sound of a grenade explosion from inside the target building, followed by American submachine gun fire and German screams. "Building clear, Sarge," comes a shout from an upstairs window. But there's no time to rest. As they move deeper into Pallenberg, the Americans find themselves engaged in brutal hand-to-hand combat. In one apartment, Corporal Dexter Martin rounds a corner to find himself face-to-face with a German soldier. Both men's rifles are empty. The German lunges with his bayonet. Martin parries with his own weapon, the steel blades clanging together. They grapple in the confined space, each trying to gain the advantage. Martin manages to draw his trench knife and plunges it into the German's throat, watching the life drain from the man's eyes that look no older than his own 19 years. Later, as darkness falls over Pallenberg, the Americans secure what's left of the town. The men of the 30th Division have learned a brutal lesson today. Urban combat is a special kind of hell. In the open field, a soldier might see his enemy from hundreds of yards away. Here, in these narrow streets and cramped buildings, death waits around every corner, behind every door. Exhausted men collapse in cleared buildings, many too tired even to eat their K-rations. Some stare blankly at walls, shell-shocked by the day's horrors. Others write letters home they're not sure will ever be sent. Few can sleep through the sporadic gunfire and distant explosions that continue through the night. October 3, 1944. Rimberg Castle, Germany. The medieval stone fortress that has stood for centuries along the German-Dutch border now serves as a German strongpoint, its thick walls providing perfect protection for defenders. Lieutenant William Harrison of the 117th Infantry Regiment studies the castle through his binoculars from a concealed position 300 yards away. The ancient structure looks impervious to small arms fire. Stone walls that have weathered centuries of European wars now shelter German soldiers, armed with machine guns and Panzerfausts. The attack begins with a mortar barrage, shells arcing through the morning mist to explode against the castle walls. The impacts raise dust and debris, but do little structural damage to the centuries-old stonework. The Germans hold their fire, conserving ammunition. Harrison leads his men across open ground toward the castle moat. They're halfway there when the Germans open up with devastating crossfire from multiple positions. Men fall left and right. There's no cover in the open field, nothing but exposed, muddy ground. "Fall back!" Harrison shouts, realizing the suicide nature of the frontal assault. As the Americans retreat, German mortars begin falling among them. Private George Sullivan is hit by shrapnel, the metal fragments tearing through his back and legs. He collapses, screaming for help. Corporal Frank Diaz breaks from the retreating line to drag Sullivan to safety. Both men are cut down by machine gun fire before they make it 10 yards. The Americans regroup and identify a drainage ditch that runs behind the castle, providing potential cover for a flanking maneuver. As they plan, American 155mm howitzers begin targeting the castle, the massive shells making an impact where mortars could not. One direct hit collapses a section of the eastern wall, sending centuries-old stones tumbling to the ground. Harrison seizes the opportunity. "Third squad, lay down suppressing fire. First and second squads with me. We're going around back while they're distracted." Using the drainage ditch for cover, Harrison leads 20 men in a wide flanking maneuver to the rear of the castle. They approach from a blind spot in the German defenses, moving quickly across the last exposed stretch to reach the base of the walls. Sergeant Miller, the demolition expert, places shaped charges against what appears to be a weakened section of the rear wall. The men take cover as the explosion blasts a man-sized hole in the ancient stonework. "Grenades first," Harrison orders. 3 M2 fragmentation grenades sail through the opening, exploding with sharp cracks inside. Then Harrison leads the way, Thompson's submachine gun at the ready. The breach opens into what was once a kitchen, now converted to a German barracks. 2 defenders lie dead from the grenade blasts. A third, wounded, raises his hands in surrender. The Americans secure him and move deeper into the castle. What follows is room-by-room combat at its most primeval. In the confined spaces, firefights last seconds. Men die without ever seeing who shot them. The ancient castle, witness to centuries of European history, now absorbs the blood of young men from Ohio, Tennessee, and North Carolina, mixing with that of defenders from Bavaria, Saxony, and Prussia. By evening, Rimberg Castle falls to the Americans, its capture costing the 117th Infantry Regiment 43 dead and wounded. Inside, they find the bodies of 27 German defenders and take 15 prisoners. The medieval fortress, having survived countless European wars, now bears the scars of modern combat. Its walls pockmarked by bullets, sections collapsed from artillery, ancient tapestries and woodwork destroyed by flames and explosions. As night falls, the men of the 117th establish defensive positions in and around the castle, wary of German counterattacks. They've taken their objective, but the cost in blood makes any sense of victory hollow. Harrison sits alone in what was once the castle's great hall, writing condolence letters by flashlight for the families of the men who didn't survive the day. October 3-4, 1944. The German 902nd Assault Gun Battalion receives urgent orders. Counterattack the American bridgehead and drive the invaders back across the Würm River. Colonel Ernst Weber, the battalion commander, studies his maps in the dim light of a command bunker. His force consists of 14 Stug 3 assault guns, armored vehicles mounting 75mm guns, and about 200 infantry from the 183rd Volksgrenadier Division. "They've broken through at Pallenberg and Rimberg," he tells his officers. "We hit them at first light, before they can bring up more armor or consolidate their positions." But Allied artillery disrupts the German timetable. Throughout the night, American 105mm and 155mm howitzers pound suspected German assembly areas, delaying the counterattack and inflicting casualties before it even begins. At 7:15 a.m. on October 4th, Weber finally launches his assault with only 9 operational assault guns. As they rumble toward American positions around Übach, a town just captured by the 119th Infantry Regiment, forward observers call in precise artillery coordinates. The first shells land among the advancing German formation, disabling 2 assault guns and scattering their infantry support. The remaining vehicles press forward, firing their 75mm guns at American positions in the town. Private First Class Thomas Reynolds crouches in the cellar of a damaged house at the edge of Ubach. The ground shakes as German shells impact nearby structures. Dust rains down from the ceiling with each explosion. "They're coming straight at us," says the BAR gunner next to him, peering through a narrow window at ground level. "I count 7 armor, lots of infantry behind them." Reynolds operates the radio, calling in the German advance to company headquarters. "Krauts approaching from the east, request tank support." "Negative on tanks," comes the reply. "All armor still crossing the river. You're on your own for now." The BAR gunner opens fire as German infantry come into view, cutting down 3 soldiers before they can find cover. Return fire shatters the remains of the window, forcing both Americans to duck down. Sergeant Karl Mueller, commanding one of the German Stug 3s, directs his driver toward a barricaded street intersection. Through his periscope, he spots American movement in a building to his right. The 75mm gun roars, sending a high-explosive shell through the wall. The structure partially collapses, killing the American squad inside. At 8:20 a.m., the full weight of American artillery descends upon the German counterattack. Not just the divisional 105mm howitzers, but corps-level 155mm and 8-inch guns join the barrage. The earth itself seems to erupt as shells create a steel rain over a half-square-mile area. When the barrage lifts after 20 minutes, the German counterattack has been shattered. 7 of the 9 assault guns lie burning or disabled. Dead and wounded German infantry litter the approaches to Ubach. The few survivors retreat in disarray. That night, Colonel Weber receives orders to prepare another counterattack for the following day. He looks at the message in disbelief. His battalion has been reduced to 2 operational assault guns and fewer than 80 infantry. To attack again would be suicide. Nevertheless, orders are orders. As Weber begins planning, he knows he is organizing not a counterattack, but a sacrifice. The defense of the German homeland will be paid for in blood, much of it German. October 9th, 1944. The advance toward Aachen slows to a bloody crawl. Major General Hobbs, commanding the 30th Infantry Division, studies maps with his staff in a captured German bunker. The division has suffered nearly 2,000 casualties in the first week of combat, with limited territorial gains to show for it. "We need to push harder toward Würselen," Hobbs tells his staff. "That's our link-up point with the 1st Division. Once we encircle Aachen, this whole front will collapse." The roads leading south toward Würselen have become killing zones. German engineers have created interlocking fields of fire, with pre-sighted artillery and mortar positions covering every approach. Each crossroad is barricaded and mined, forcing American vehicles into ambush points. Sergeant William Cooper of the 2nd Armored Division's 67th Armor Regiment sits in the commander's hatch of his M4 Sherman tank, studying the road ahead through binoculars. His tank, nicknamed Steel Coffin, leads a column of 5 Shermans supporting the infantry advance. "Driver, halt," Cooper orders, spotting suspicious disturbances in the road surface. "I think we've got mines ahead." Engineers move carefully forward, using mine detectors and probing tools. "Definitely mines, Sergeant," Lieutenant Raymond Peterson confirms. "Teller mines, spaced about 2 meters apart. Give us 30 minutes to clear a path." As the engineers work, Cooper scans the buildings lining the roadway. The area seems deserted, but he knows better than to trust appearances. "Gunner, keep your eyes on those windows across the street. I don't like how quiet it is." The engineers have cleared 10 mines when it happens. A barrage of fire erupts from multiple buildings, machine guns, rifles, and the distinctive whoosh of Panzerfausts, the German anti-tank weapons. "Ambush!" Cooper shouts into his radio. "All tanks, target buildings at 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock. The Sherman's 75mm main gun roars, sending a high-explosive shell into a building where a machine gun nest is positioned. The structure's facade collapses in a cloud of dust and debris. Lieutenant Peterson and 2 engineers are cut down by the initial burst of machine gun fire, their bodies crumpling on the mine-strewn road. The remaining engineers scramble for cover behind the Sherman's protective bulk. Corporal Martinez, driving the 3rd tank in the column, spots a German with a Panzerfaust taking aim from an upper-story window. Target, Panzerfaust, second floor, gray building, he shouts to his gunner. The gunner swings the turret, but not quickly enough. The Panzerfaust launches its shape-charge warhead, striking the second tank in the column. The armor-piercing warhead penetrates the Sherman's side armor, igniting ammunition inside. The tank erupts in flames, its hatches flying open as crewmen attempt to escape the inferno. Only 2 of the 5-man crew make it out, one with his clothing ablaze. For 20 minutes, the street is a storm of fire, smoke, and death. The American tanks systematically destroy buildings harboring German defenders, their 75mm shells reducing the structures to rubble. Infantry from the 117th Regiment arrive to support, clearing buildings room by room. By the time the ambush is neutralized, the Americans have lost 1 tank destroyed, another damaged, and 9 infantry and engineers killed, with 14 wounded. They've advanced precisely 0 yards toward their objective. This scene repeats itself throughout the 30th Division's sector over the next 2 days. Each road, each intersection, each seemingly insignificant terrain feature must be taken with blood. German resistance grows more determined as the Americans push deeper into the Reich. On October 10, the division's intelligence section reports a disturbing development. Elements of the 3rd Panzer Grenadier Division and the 116th Panzer Division have arrived to reinforce the German defenses. These veteran formations, though under strength, represent a significant escalation in the quality of opposition. That evening, Major General Hobbs receives a communication from 1st Army headquarters. Despite the slow progress and mounting casualties, the orders remain unchanged. Continue the advance toward Würselen, link up with the 1st Infantry Division, and complete the encirclement of Aachen. Hobbs studies the message, then looks at the casualty reports spread across the table. Nearly 3,000 men of his division are dead, wounded, or missing after 8 days of combat. The faces of the dead men seem to rise before him in the dim light of the command post. "Send acknowledgement," he tells his communications officer. "We will continue the advance at first light." Outside, a cold rain begins to fall, washing blood from the streets of the shattered towns and villages around Aachen. The battle continues, implacable and merciless. October 16, 1944. After 2 weeks of brutal combat, the 30th Infantry Division approaches Würselen, northeast of Aachen. The division has been bled white, with some companies reduced to less than 50% strength. Replacements arrive daily, fresh-faced young men from training camps in England and the United States, many with less than 6 months in uniform. They fill the gaps left by the dead and wounded, learning the brutal realities of combat on the job. The attack begins at 0600 hours with a massive artillery barrage. For 30 minutes, the earth trembles under the impact of high explosives. Sergeant David Wilson of E Company leads his squad forward as the barrage lifts. They move rapidly across open ground toward a tree line, marking their first objective. The morning air is cool and misty, reducing visibility. The squad reaches the trees without taking fire, which immediately raises Wilson's suspicions. The Germans never give ground this easily. "Hold position," he orders, signaling to the platoon leader that something feels wrong. Lieutenant Harris crawls forward to join Wilson at the edge of the tree line. "What have you got, Sergeant?" "Nothing, sir. That's what bothers me. We should have taken fire by now." Harris surveys the ground ahead through binoculars, a gentle slope leading up to a ridgeline about 400 yards distant. Maybe the artillery did its job for once. As if in answer, the distinctive sound of German MG-42 machine guns erupts from concealed positions on the ridge. The bullets cut through the trees, sending splinters flying and forcing the Americans to hug the earth. "There they are," Wilson mutters. "They let the first wave get into the killing zone." All along the battalion front, American infantry find themselves pinned down by well-sighted German machine guns and mortars. The advance stalls before it truly begins. Colonel Madison, receiving reports of the situation, immediately calls for tank support. The Sherman tanks of the 743rd Tank Battalion rumble forward, their 75mm guns firing at suspected German positions. Private First Class Thomas Kelly crouches behind a fallen tree, watching as a Sherman passes just 10 yards to his right. The massive vehicle provides a sense of security that quickly proves false when a German Panzerfaust anti-tank rocket streaks from the ridge, striking the tank's side armor. The Sherman jerks to a halt, smoke pouring from the hatches. 3 crewmen escape the burning vehicle. The other 2 remain inside, their fates sealed by flame and exploding ammunition. Despite the resistance, the American advance continues, yard by bloody yard. Artillery observers call in precise coordinates, and 105mm and 155mm shells pound the German positions. P-47 Thunderbolt fighter bombers appear overhead as the morning mist burns off, strafing and bombing the ridgeline. By noon, elements of the 117th Regiment have fought their way to the base of the ridge, using smokescreens to conceal their movement. The Germans continue to resist, but their fire becomes less coordinated as American artillery systematically destroys their positions. At 14:37 hours, a radio message electrifies the American command post. Vanguard elements of the 18th Infantry Regiment, 1st Division sighted to our south, distance approximately 800 yards. Moving to link up, Captain Hayes, leading E Company up the southern face of the ridge, spots American helmets on the opposite slope. "Hold fire! Friendlies to the front!" he shouts. At 15:22 hours, a patrol from E Company, 117th Regiment, meets a reconnaissance element from F Company, a battalion of the 18th Regiment, 1st Infantry Division. The sergeants leading the respective patrols shake hands in a muddy drainage ditch, completing the encirclement of Aachen. The news travels quickly up the chain of command. At 1st Army Headquarters, General Courtney Hodges receives the report with grim satisfaction. Aachen, the first major German city to face capture, is now cut off from reinforcement or resupply. Inside the city, Colonel Gerhard Wilk, commander of the German garrison, receives the news with stoic resignation. His forces, approximately 5,000 men, are now surrounded by 2 American infantry divisions with overwhelming artillery and air support. His orders from Hitler are explicit: defend to the last man, the last bullet. October 17-19, 1944. Inside the encircled city of Aachen, Colonel Gerhard Wilk establishes his command post in a massive 4-story air raid shelter at 348 Rucherstrasse. The reinforced concrete structure, built to protect civilians from Allied bombing, now serves as the nerve center for the city's desperate defense. Wilk, a veteran of the Eastern Front, surveys the situation map with his staff officers. The 5,000 men under his command include elements of several different units: the 246th Volksgrenadier Division, the 1st SS Panzer Battalion, police forces, and Volkssturm militia, hastily cobbled together as the American noose tightened around the city. "Gentlemen," Wilk addresses his officers, "our situation is clear. The Führer has ordered Aachen to be held at all costs. We will defend this city street by street, house by house, room by room." Outside the command bunker, German soldiers transform the ancient city into a fortress. Centuries-old buildings become strongpoints, their thick stone walls ideal for defense. Streets are barricaded with overturned trams, rubble, and furniture requisitioned from abandoned homes. Snipers take positions in church towers and upper floors of apartment buildings, establishing interlocking fields of fire. Corporal Kurt Schmidt of the 246th Volksgrenadier Division supervises the fortification of a 5-story apartment building overlooking a major intersection. His squad, 8 men, most under 20 years old, works silently, moving furniture to block doorways and breaking holes through interior walls to allow movement between rooms without exposing themselves to the street. "Faster," Schmidt urges them. "The Americans will be here soon." One of the younger soldiers, barely 17, looks up from his work. "Will reinforcements come, Corporal? They say we're completely surrounded." Schmidt meets the boy's eyes, seeing fear poorly disguised as courage. "Our orders are to hold. That's all we need to know." As German defenders prepare, American forces begin probing attacks against the city's outer defenses. Artillery shells rain down at irregular intervals, targeting known or suspected strongpoints. Occasionally, fighter bombers sweep overhead, strafing any visible movement in the streets. On October 18th, the Americans launch coordinated attacks on multiple sectors of the city's perimeter. The 26th Infantry Regiment of the 1st Division drives into Aachen from the east, while elements of the 30th Division apply pressure from the north. Schmidt's position comes under attack at mid-morning. American infantry, supported by Sherman tanks, advance cautiously up the street toward the intersection his squad guards. "Hold fire," Schmidt orders as the Americans come into view. "Let them get closer." When the lead Sherman is just 100 yards from the intersection, Schmidt gives the signal. His machine gunner opens fire from a second-floor window, while two men with Panzerfausts target the tank. The Sherman's 75mm gun roars, sending a high-explosive shell into the building where Schmidt's machine gunner is positioned. The explosion collapses part of the facade, killing the gunner instantly. American infantry rush forward, using the disabled tank for cover as they toss smoke grenades to obscure the German fields of fire. Schmidt directs his remaining men to fall back to the secondary positions on the third floor. For the next 4 hours, the apartment building becomes a battlefield in miniature. The Americans clear it room by room, using grenades, submachine guns, and flamethrowers. The Germans fight for every foot of space, retreating upward floor by floor. By late afternoon, Schmidt finds himself alone on the 5th floor, the last survivor of his squad. He's been wounded twice, a bullet through his left arm and shrapnel in his right leg. American voices echo from the stairwell as they prepare to clear the final floor. Checking his ammunition, 3 grenades and half a magazine for his MP40, Schmidt makes his decision. He will not be taken prisoner. As the first American appears at the top of the stairs, Schmidt pulls the pin on a grenade and charges. Similar scenes play out across Aachen as the Americans methodically reduce the German defenses. Progress is measured in buildings cleared, street corners secured. The combat is intimate and brutal, often hand-to-hand in confined spaces where rifles are too unwieldy to use effectively. On October 19th, Colonel Wilk receives devastating news. The Hotel Quellenhof, one of his key strongpoints, has fallen to the Americans after fierce fighting. The 26th Infantry Regiment now controls most of the eastern half of the city. That afternoon, Wilk gathers his remaining officers in the command bunker. Their faces show the strain of days without proper sleep, of constant combat and dwindling resources. "Gentlemen," Wilk says quietly, "we have fulfilled our obligation to the Führer and the fatherland. We have exacted a heavy price from the enemy for every street, every building in Aachen." He pauses, looking at each man in turn. "But continuing resistance means only the complete destruction of this ancient city and the needless deaths of our remaining men. I have decided to seek terms with the Americans." That evening, Wilk composes a final order to his troops. "The defenders of Aachen have fulfilled their duty in accordance with their oath to the flag. Further resistance is pointless and would lead only to the senseless destruction of the venerable imperial city of Aachen and the useless sacrifice of the remaining defenders. With a heavy heart, I have decided to cease resistance." As night falls over the shattered city, white flags begin appearing at German positions. The battle for Aachen is entering its final hours. October 21, 1944, 12:05 p.m. Colonel Gerhard Wilk, commander of the German garrison in Aachen, formally surrenders to Lieutenant Colonel John Corley of the 3rd Battalion, 26th Infantry Regiment, U.S. 1st Infantry Division. The ceremony takes place in the lobby of the air raid shelter at 348 Rucherstrasse that served as Wilk's headquarters. Wilk, impeccable in his dress uniform despite the chaos of the past weeks, hands over his sidearm to Corley. "I surrender the city of Aachen," he says stiffly in accented English. "My men have fought with honor." Corley nods in acknowledgement. "Your men fought well, Colonel. The surrender will be processed with full military courtesy." As American soldiers begin the process of disarming and processing the German prisoners, approximately 3,473 men within the city proper, the full extent of the battle's devastation becomes apparent. Aachen, a city with 2,000 years of history, lies in ruins. Aerial reconnaissance photographs show that 85% of the city's structures have been destroyed or severely damaged. The once beautiful cathedral where Charlemagne was crowned in 800 AD stands amid the rubble, its dome destroyed, but its core structure miraculously intact. Streets are impassable, filled with debris, destroyed vehicles, and in many places, unrecovered bodies. The human cost is staggering. Since the battle began on October 2nd, the 30th Infantry Division has suffered approximately 3,000 men killed and wounded. The 1st Infantry Division reports at least 1,350 casualties, 150 killed, and 1,200 wounded. In total, American forces have lost over 5,000 men taking Aachen. German losses are equally severe, over 5,000 casualties, plus 5,600 taken prisoner. The city's civilian population, evacuated before the battle, has been spared, but their homes and livelihoods lie in ruins. Captain Michael Stevens, a medical officer with the 30th Division, tours a German field hospital incorporated into American lines after the surrender. The conditions shock him. Critical shortages of antibiotics, anesthetics, and even basic bandages have resulted in primitive care for the wounded. Gangrene and infection run rampant. Many German wounded will not survive, despite now being under American medical care. In a triage area, Stevens encounters a German doctor, his white coat stained with blood and filth after days of continuous surgery. "How many?" Stevens asks simply, gesturing to the rows of wounded. The German physician shrugs wearily. "I stopped counting after the first 100. We did what we could." Stevens nods, understanding the universal brotherhood of medical personnel. "We'll take over now. Get some rest." Outside the city, engineers of both the 30th and 1st Divisions begin the monumental task of clearing routes through the debris. Bulldozers push rubble aside to create paths for military traffic. Explosive ordnance disposal teams work to locate and neutralize thousands of unexploded shells, mines, and booby traps left behind by both sides. Lieutenant David Harris walks alone through what was once a residential street in the city center. Buildings lean drunkenly against each other, facades torn away to reveal the intimate details of former lives. A dining table set for a meal never eaten, a child's bedroom with toys scattered across the floor, family photographs still hanging on partially collapsed walls. As he rounds a corner, Harris encounters an elderly German man, somehow overlooked in the evacuation, standing amid the ruins of what was likely his home. The man, well into his 70s, stares at Harris without expression, neither hostile nor welcoming. For a moment, the two men regard each other across the gulf of nationality, language, and the war that has brought them to this moment. Then Harris reaches into his pocket, pulls out a chocolate bar from his rations, and offers it to the old man. After a hesitation, the German accepts it with a slight nod. No words are exchanged. None are necessary. The battle for Aachen is over, but the war continues. In the coming months, American forces will push deeper into Germany, facing fierce resistance at the Hürtgen Forest and the Battle of the Bulge, before finally achieving victory in May 1945. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. The war in Europe is officially over. In the 7 months since the Battle of Aachen, American forces have fought their way across Germany, linking up with Soviet troops at the Elbe River. Adolf Hitler is dead by his own hand in the ruins of Berlin. The Third Reich, promised to last 1,000 years, has collapsed after 12. Captain Richard Hayes, one of the few officers of the 30th Infantry Division to survive from Normandy to VE Day, sits on a hillside overlooking the Rhine River, writing in his journal. His company is now responsible for occupation duties in a small German town, a far cry from the brutal combat they experienced at Aachen and in the subsequent battles. "It's over," he writes. The men received the news with strange quietness. No cheering, no celebration, just a profound relief that they might now have a chance to grow old. Hayes closes his journal and looks out at the peaceful river. Of the 162 men who landed with him in Normandy, Only 17 remain in his company. The others have been killed, wounded, captured, or transferred. Aachen alone cost him 34 men, dead or too badly wounded to return to duty. The ancient imperial city of Aachen lies in ruins, its reconstruction just beginning. It will take decades to rebuild what was destroyed in 19 days of combat in October 1944. Some historic structures, buildings that had stood for centuries, are gone forever, existing only in photographs and memories. The men of the 30th Infantry Division, nicknamed Roosevelt's SS by the Germans for their fighting tenacity, have earned their place in military history. They suffered over 3,000 casualties at Aachen, part of the division's total loss of 24,111 men killed, wounded, or missing throughout the war. For the soldiers who fought there, Aachen represents a particular kind of hell, urban combat at its most primal and intimate. Fighting room to room, floor to floor, often hand to hand in confined spaces, they experienced warfare stripped of technology and strategy, reduced to its most basic form: kill or be killed. The psychological toll is immeasurable. Many survivors will carry invisible wounds for the rest of their lives, nightmares, flashbacks, what will later be recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder. Some will never speak of what they experienced. Others will find that civilian life feels empty after the intense camaraderie and purpose of combat. Military historians and planners study the Battle of Aachen extensively in the post-war years. The lessons learned about urban combat, the need for combined arms operations, the importance of artillery support, the techniques for clearing buildings, influenced doctrine and training for decades to come. When American forces find themselves fighting in Seoul in 1950 or Hue in 1968, they will apply methods developed in the rubble of Aachen. As for the city itself, it rises again. By 1950, reconstruction is well underway. Aachen's historic cathedral is carefully restored. New buildings rise alongside those that could be salvaged. The population returns and grows. Today, Aachen is once again a thriving city. Its dark chapter as the first German city captured by Allied forces in World War II, preserved in museums and memorials. The men who fought there, American and German alike, gradually fade away. Veterans return for anniversaries, the 50th, the 60th, the 70th. Their numbers dwindle with each passing year until eventually the battle lives on only in history books, photographs, and the architectural scars still visible to those who know where to look. But for 19 days in October 1944, Aachen was the epicenter of one of history's most intense urban battles, a place where young men from Ohio, Tennessee, and North Carolina fought and died to capture a city most had never heard of before the war, facing equally determined defenders fighting for their homeland. It was a battle without glory or romance, a brutal contest of willpower and endurance that reduced an ancient city to rubble and claimed thousands of lives on both sides. In the end, it was just one chapter in the larger story of World War II, but for those who survived it, the Battle of Aachen would remain etched in memory as a glimpse into the darkest capabilities of modern warfare. Thank you for listening. If you are also proud of the bravery of our soldiers, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new historical stories.